This started out being an 8-foot 2x4 that I cut in half and laminated together. I've been using this piece to test turning tools and lathes, but now I'm going to cut it up and make some ornaments out of it. And I'm going to try and include one of these shapes into one of the ornaments. After I break this down, I want to put the pieces in my chuck for turning, so I need to start turning tenons on it. After you do this for a while, you can pretty much eyeball a tenon, but I always keep a caliper around to check it to make sure. And I always shut off the lathe and let it stop before I check the tenon, because this is a good caliper and I don't want to bust it up. Next, I'm going to move the tool rest down a ways and cut another tenon. Later on, I'll cut all these pieces apart. I want to make each workpiece 3 or 4 inches longer than I need, so I have room to work on either end of an ornament before I actually part it off with a chuck. You can use a small saw to cut these pieces apart. It just takes a long time and it's not a lot of fun on the lathe. And this is the easier way. I use my parting tool to make a cut behind the tenon, and I left the piece in the center. It's about 3/4 of an inch in diameter. It's easy to saw that off, and we get a nice clean piece to put in the truck. Now I can start working the shape into this piece. This is a 1/2 inch spindle gouge that I keep pretty sharp, and I use it for just about everything these days at the lathe. I want to make a thin spire on this end, so I'm just going to start working this end down. We don't want to get in a hurry and put a lot of pressure on the piece when we're doing this, especially when we start getting the piece thinned out. Throughout this process, I try and keep the bevel rubbing so I get the best surface I can right off of the tool. This is going to be one of the last deep cuts I can take, because there's not going to be enough material left to support much pressure. From here on out, we got to take it easy and make nice even cuts. And on this last cut, you notice that I almost take too much material off. As I start down the face, I can see I'm taking too much material, so I roll the tool out, smooth this cut off, and then run out to the end and taper it. This is actually what I wanted. I just got to it a little sooner than I planned on. I'm done shaping this part of it, so I can go ahead and do the sanding on this piece and get that done before we move on. I do the shaping and sanding in stages so we can leave a lot of material at the truck to keep the piece as stable as possible as we work. And yes, I try and do all of the sanding in those stages. This is a 320 grit foam block, and I'll take each stage down to 320 grit as I go along. After I finish sanding that part, I can move the tool rest over and set it up for cutting the next shape. We have to remember, when we get closer to the chuck, we're going to have to make a big V in this piece, so we got room to get the tool in to finish off the piece we want to part off and still to be able to do this safely. I've already decided to make the top part of this ornament a simple ball, so I can rough that shape in as I'm cutting away the material near the chuck. As I get closer to the shape I want, I'll start carrying the cut further down so I can open up the V cut and finish off the top of the ornament and still leave some of it connected to the chuck. Before I take this connector to the waist section down too thin, I'm going to go ahead and sand the rounded portion of this ornament right now. Leaving a good amount of material connecting this piece to the chuck will let me lean on the sanding a little bit to finish shaping this piece. If you notice, I left a flat around the outside of the ornament. It's only 3/8 of a 1/2 inch wide, but as you'll see, as soon as I start sanding, it disappears and the ornament goes nice and round. I don't know if this is considered cheating or not, but it works, so I don't care. After sanding, I can go ahead and work this down so I can make the final cuts before parting this piece off. I'll be able to sand one final time right at the area where I'm working now. Then the remaining sanding will be in a very small area, and we'll do that by hand to finish it up. I can still sand the ornament, but I have to be very light and stay away from the end. Here I've laid a sharp skew chisel on the tool rest and just turn the piece by hand to slice off the ornament. I'm using awl to poke a little pilot hole in the end of the ornament where we just parted it off, and then screw in a little screw eye for hanging it up. We're also going to hang the piece up for painting on that screw eye, so we'll wind up painting the eye at the same time. After the final sanding and cleaning with a tack rag, I start applying light coats of paint. This is relatively fast drying paint from the home center, and it works good. Over the next day or so, I'll just take my time and put a bunch of light coats on it to get it nice and shiny. Some like to put on just a few coats so you can see the grain through the paint, and you can do it however you want with your ornaments. If you make your ornaments with really good wood, you could use a nice clear finish to show the grain fully. And here's the ornament we turned earlier in this piece. And you don't need to spend a whole bunch when you make ornaments. I did all this out of pine on a mini lathe. And so if you've got scraps of just about any kind of wood, and you have just about any kind of lathe, you can make ornaments of just about any kind of shape to give to just about anybody as a gift to use in your own home or maybe even sell. And best of all, you don't need a bunch of money. You just need a little time and a little creativity.